Have you ever thought about what it would be like to be born somewhere where the wind tells old stories, the sun burns even the shadows, and every step sounds like a prayer that isn't being said? A city grew in the middle of endless dunes and mountains of quiet, full of secrets and myths that no one could understand. A child's story would start quietly on that dry and holy ground, but it would have an unseen purpose that would change the fate of countries. Someone grew up hearing the sounds of wagons and hearing stories about stone gods. Who was that child? How might something good come from the hurt, the loss, and the quiet thought in the middle of a society of conflict? The answer resounds through history like thunder. That child was Mahoma. His life is not recorded in the Bible, but it has a strong lesson of faith, change, and purpose. The year was 570 AD. Mecca was the city in question. It was a busy one in the middle of the Arabian Peninsula, and trade was booming among the expensive fabrics, exotic scents, and rare spices. In this place, surrounded by golden dust and the sounds of the ancestors, Mahoma was born. But he had already lost his father before he opened his eyes. When he arrived, there was quiet and grief, which meant that his road would be hard, but great. Growing up with his mother, he knew only short-lived love and care, since she also died too soon. The child's grandpa, Abdul Muttalib, took him in. He was a man of honor whose name was admired by the elders and clan chiefs. Mahoma learned from him in ways that didn't come from reading books, but from looking at him, imitating him, and paying close attention. When things looked like they are going badly, his grandfather showed him how important it is to be quiet and strong. Life, with its uncertain string of losses, hit him again, though. When the boy's grandpa died when he was still a child, his uncle Abu Talib took care of him. His uncle, who was a trader with a lot of experience and always on the move, gave the young Muhammad a place to stay and a better understanding of the world. As he traveled with the caravans, Muhammad learned about the habits of the different groups, the beliefs of the foreigners, and the stories of wise people from faraway places. At that time, Mecca was more than just a key spot on trade lines. The Kaaba, which stands for holy place, was the spiritual heart of many groups of people. This cube-shaped building stood in the middle of the city like a relic from a long time ago. There were hundreds of idols all around it that stood for the gods of different clans. People from all over the world came to pray to their carved gods, pay their respects, and ask them to protect them. Many people saw it as a holy place. But for Mahoma, the refuge didn't just seem to hold idols. When he was a child, he watched the travelers walk, the priests pray, and the important people do what they wanted. He thought there was real faith there, but it was hidden by doing the same things over and over and forgetting what they meant. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something was missing that he could feel in his heart. Mahoma became known for being honest and smart as he got older. He was known as Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy one. He didn't get involved in fights between tribes or in the greedy business deals of the traders. He liked quiet thought more than noise, and the truth more than quick money. Many people didn't see what he did, the spiritual emptiness of a society stuck in lifeless customs. When he needed to think, he went to the caves around Mecca, especially those on Mount Hira. The desert silence showed him how restless his soul was. Everything spoke to him in a way that no one else could. The stars at night, the wind, and the endless vastness all spoke to him. It was like the world itself was getting him ready for something that no one could understand. According to Islamic records, Muhammad got the first heavenly word from the angel Gabriel when he was 40 years old. He did this in a mood of deep thought. That night, he heard words that would start a new spiritual age. Neither did he call himself God, nor did he want crowns or troops. The only thing he said was that the one invisible and absolute God had sent him to tell the world what he had said. It wasn't easy to accept this calling. The people in Mecca didn't like his message. Tribal leaders hurt him because they were afraid of losing power and control. People made fun of Muhammad and his followers, and many of them were abused. But neither he nor the people who believed what he said gave up. Something lit a light that couldn't be put out. Little by little, his lessons became stronger, not because he used violence, but because he was consistent in how he lived his life, had a good character, and was sure that the truth could not be hidden. He taught about fairness, kindness, forgiving, and taking responsibility. It was he who talked about a God who could see into people's deepest thoughts and feelings, and who wasn't stuck in pictures, but lived beyond creation. After many years, Muhammad went back to Mecca as a calm leader instead of an enemy. He entered the city with honor, got rid of all the idols in the Kaaba, and confirmed the belief in one God that he said went back to Abraham's time. His word wasn't meant to destroy cultures, it was meant to bring back what had been lost, a real link between people and God. Many people believe in him, but his story is not in the Bible. However, his life had a spiritual effect on everyone. Millions of people started to pray, fast, and live their lives based on what he taught them. His story still moves people, makes them think, and starts debates. So, out of the empty desert came a sound that has been heard for thousands of years. Muhammad, an orphan from Mecca, grew up to be a preacher who fought the gods of stone and pointed to things that couldn't be seen. His story isn't just about religion. It's also about having a reason, being strong, and having faith. Before we go on with this moving story about faith, courage, and change, please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on alerts. This is where we share stories like the one you are about to read that change your point of view and warm your heart. Also, please leave a super thanks if you want to help this work. We can keep telling more Bible stories and spreading this message of faith and hope thanks to your gift. Thank you so much for your help. Let's keep going on our trip today. It was very fancy at the customs in Mecca, but Muhammad felt like there was something missing. The rituals were beautiful and the people were fervent, but they couldn't fill the void that was in the air. It seemed like every prayer, song, and act of loyalty to the gods around the Kaaba had nothing to do with the real world. The shape was there, but the spirit or soul didn't seem to be there. It was like an echo that got lost among the old stones. And it was just that quiet inside that started to speak louder in his soul. Over time, that boy who had been left alone had grown up to be a young man with a calm face and a sharp eye. Muhammad naturally cared about other people, and everyone in Mecca knew how honest he was. There was neither pride nor too much desire in the way he acted. People, traders, and clan leaders all wanted to talk to him because they trusted what he said. Khadija, a wealthy widow who ran big trade groups and needed an honest person to run her business on the desert routes, was drawn to him because of his fame. Khadija was a very wise woman who made important choices in her time while also being quiet and careful. She wanted to meet Muhammad as soon as she heard about him. He made an instant impact on her with his humble demeanor, thoughtful answers, and most of all, his honesty, which touched her deeply. Muhammad, on the other hand, truly admired her and saw in her not only a businessman, but also a loyal and caring person. This was the start of a relationship that would soon close up. She quickly decided to marry him. Muhammad felt more stable and like she belonged after she got married. He felt like he was in a real home for the first time since he was a kid. It wasn't just walls, but love, trust, and respect for each other. He could share his questions, ideas, and silences with her. Khadija not only paid attention, she also got what he was saying. When he told her about the worries that kept him up at night, she didn't make fun of him or put him down. Instead, she held his hand tightly, as if they were holding on to fate without knowing where it will lead them. Even though Muhammad had a safe home, was doing well in business, and was respected by the public, his heart was still restless. He felt a strange longing in his heart, like he was always looking for something he couldn't quite put his finger on. As his search went on, it took him farther and farther away from the busy streets of Mecca and toward the hills, where it was quiet and no one was waiting for him except the sky. Muhammad's best place to escape was Mount Hira, a steep, quiet peak a few kilometers from the city. He often went up by himself with just enough food and water for a few days. It was so quiet at night that he could only look up at the sky and listen to the wind as if it were a message. The city below looked like it was asleep and didn't know what was going on above. It seemed like every star, every breath of night air, and every rock that was cold to the touch held clues to a bigger puzzle. He prayed there. He didn't want to stone idols, but to an unknown God that he felt was different, unseen, and bigger than anything people could make or name. His words were not official at all. Devotion is all, only the truth. And it was in his faith that his soul found peace, that the traditions in Mecca had never given it. Things were going well until one of those nights on Mount Hira. It wasn't just a thought or a gut feeling. It felt real and will stay with me forever. Mahoma felt like there was someone or something around him, like the air had changed. There was a thick silence everywhere. Because his eyes were used to the dark, they didn't see anyone, but there was someone or something there. Then I heard a voice. Okay, firm, without a doubt. Write down. The sound came from everywhere, like the wind was talking. Mahoma felt scared. His whole body shook. He had a mess of thoughts. Recite, the voice said over and over. How to read? What? The man wasn't good with words or writing, but the voice kept coming back. Write down. He didn't understand why the words were coming out of him. Not as his own thoughts, but as if someone or something were breathing into him. It felt like someone had touched his soul. The words were rich, heavy, and holy, and they came easily. They didn't come from his mind. They seemed to go through his spirit. He said them again and again, not because he had to, but because he felt like it, like someone drinking water in the middle of the desert. Mahoma fell to his knees when the voice stopped. He had heavy breathing, his hands were shaking and his body was wet. A very strange event had just happened. He had no idea what to say or if anyone would believe him. But deep down, he knew that this was the start of something he couldn't even picture. He walked slowly down the hill. His heart was still beating fast. He had a lot of thoughts going through his head. He was sure that he had to tell Khadija because she was the only one who could understand. She ran to meet him when she saw him come in, pale and out of breath. He told her what had happened, but his words were all over the place. As she had done many times before, she didn't think twice. Khadija paid attention, accepted him, and believed him. As if she could see beyond what the eye could see, she said, "What you have heard comes from above. You're not by yourself." Things started to change after that night. Mahoma knew he had been given something holy. His soul had been marked, even though he didn't fully understand what had been given to him. Everything about the sound, the words, and the way it made them feel showed that a new road was opening up. He was no longer just a hunter or a trader. He was now someone who had been picked. Who did it? Why? Things would work out in the end, but the trip had already started. Muhammad found more than safety in Khadija's arms as he went down Mount Hira with his heart still pounding. He could understand. She didn't just listen to him like anyone would listen to any story. She made him feel like what he was saying came from a higher power. Khadija was the first person to believe, not because she had seen the angel or heard the voice, but because she saw the living truth in Mahoma. She saw it in every move he made and every hesitant word he tried to put together to describe what he had seen or heard. Now words were filling the silence in his soul, calling him to something much bigger. The discoveries kept coming. They came in waves, some of which were gentle and some of which were very strong. They found Mahoma instead of him looking for them. Every new word was more than just a spiritual piece. It was a call. Now it's time to speak out instead of being quiet. The message started to take shape. It was a thread that tied together everything he had known since he was a child. A single, unseeable, all-powerful God. A creator who didn't want gifts in front of idols, but instead wanted people to live honestly, be honest, and sincerely follow his will. From then on, Muhammad knew that the experience couldn't just be his. He couldn't hold inside himself such an important, pressing, and powerful message. This made him start to talk about it, first with people close to him. Khadija was the first person who believed. After that, his loyal friend Abu Bakr, who had a kind and open heart, heard and agreed. Next, some family members came up to him. They were moved not only by what he was saying, but also by how he seemed to have changed. He was now speaking as if heaven were whispering his thoughts to him. There was a small, quiet group that stood out like a flame in the dark. At first, no one cared about them. Mecca kept going around its usual track of trade and worshipping idols, not realizing that the people were becoming more interested in something else. But Muhammad didn't want to just talk inside the walls of his house. His voice became hurried, as if each day were too important to be kept quiet. He started to preach in public, without fear, in the markets, the parks, and among the people who were walking by. The whispers then started. At first, everyone just looked at each other, confused by this talk about a single God who didn't have a picture, a building, or a figure. And there was a God who wanted justice, saw deep into everyone, and wasn't fooled by what they looked like. This word quickly spread from person to person. Some made fun of them, and others left. People did stop and listen, though, and deep down, they knew it was the truth they had been looking for a long time. But the leaders of the city did not like this growth. The business of Mecca was based on people making pilgrimages to the Kaaba and worshipping many gods. All of that was in danger in the new message. Why would people keep coming if they stopped believing in idols? Trade would get worse. It would be hard for the noble families to keep their power, that the leaders' power would be called into question. It seemed like Muhammad was shaking the roots that held up the city's reputation. That's why suspicion quickly turned into hatred. At first, what was being done to Muhammad and his followers was not clear. Ironic remarks, broken business deals, and offers removed. But over time, hatred stopped being a thought and turned into a real thing. People who followed Muhammad started to be beaten up in public, fired from their jobs, and split up from their families. It became expensive to have hope. But Muhammad did not give up. His face didn't show anger. It showed pain. Every story of a student being slandered hit him like an arrow in the chest. He felt every tear that a person who only wanted to honor one God shed as if it were his own. Sumaya was one of those people. The world saw her as a weak woman, but she had a huge heart. She was one of the first people to say in public that she was religious, and she had to suffer for that. She was slandered, put down, and beaten, but she never denied what her heart already knew to be true. Muhammad looked at her and liked what he saw. He wanted to help, but he couldn't, because anything he did would make things more dangerous for other people. His days turned into a non-stop watch. He led his following, reassured those who were doubting, soothed those who were going through hard times, and kept preaching even though he knew the danger was getting worse. Young people, the poor, workers, and people from other countries all came up to him. The powerful had forgotten about these simple people, but their hearts were hungry for truth and justice. These people didn't see Muhammad as a politician or a rebel, but as a leader, someone who always said the right thing and did what they said they would do. That person who offered instead of asking, that person didn't get rich, but spread hope, and that hope made people feel bad. The powerful tried to talk things out. They offered him money, power, and even the control of Mecca if he would stop teaching. Muhammad said no. He said he would not stop telling people what had been shown to him, even if they gave him the sun in his right hand and the moon in his left, because they had no choice. It was a call. As soon as they understood that trying to change their minds would not work, they made their position even stronger. Muhammad was in danger. People were watching his house. His moves were planned. A lot of his followers were caught, beaten, and made to give up their faith. Still they kept believing. Since pain couldn't change what they had heard or felt, they were okay. The city started to split up. Clans from the past, traders and leaders were on one side. On the other hand, there was a growing group of men and women who believed in a different way of seeing the world. They did not have any guns, troops, or power, but they did have faith. A world where truth, not thrones, held real power. Where prayer was more than just a ceremony, it was a meeting with the holy. Where justice was a divine concept, not just the right of a few people. Maori knew the road would be very long. He knew that the abuse would get worse. He knew something had started, though, and it couldn't be stopped. He was no longer the only one with that faith. It was now spread to other hearts. Even though it was getting dark, he kept going, his eyes on the sky, and his belief that the truth, even though it was surrounded by thorns, would never be hurt. Mahoma's belief grew stronger with each wrongdoing he saw. He saw hope in the eyes of his following, hope that wouldn't give up. This gave him the strength to keep going, even though a storm was forming around him. The fact that the place where he grew up turned its back on him made him even more sure that Allah's word had to be spread, even if it meant risking his own safety. Because they couldn't quiet him by persecuting him, the leaders of Mecca changed their plan. They now came with promises. You have unlimited wealth, power among the most powerful groups, and full control over all of the city's trade. Everything, as long as he stopped teaching that there is only one God. They wanted him to say it was all a lie and a temporary fantasy, to take back, to keep quiet. But Mahoma refused with the calm of someone who could see beyond what they could see. No deal could tempt him. He didn't think about it for a second. His opinion was firm in a way that Mecca's most powerful men did not understand. His steps looked like he was following a road they couldn't see, or like he had a map that went to a place they couldn't get to. When the leaders ran into this stubborn defiance, their anger turned to rage. The hatred got worse. Followers of Mahoma were no longer just ignored. They were now being treated very badly. A lot of people were hurt, some lost their homes, and some were killed. The city became a place where tensions were always high. Threats were whispered in every corner. Every darkness was a sign of danger. Even though Muhammad stayed strong, he could see that his friends were hurting more and more. Kids cried because their dads had been taken away against their will. Women were kicked out of their homes. Teenagers who joined the faith were put in a separate group, insulted and punished. He knew that he couldn't keep showing his fans this violent scene, even though the fire in his heart kept burning. It was no longer possible to plant hope in the land of Mecca. At that point, stories started to spread about Yathrib, a city in the north. A place where tribal disagreements caused people to kill each other over past wrongs and weak ties. The words about Mahoma came like a cool breeze in this tense situation. They said there was a man of character with a message of justice and togetherness who could bring people together. He was seen as a possible answer by the people of Yathrib, which would later be called Medina. Some of the people who lived there chose to look for him in secret. They went up to him, listened to what he had to say, and were touched. There was more than just a speaker in front of them. They asked him to move there and gave him a safe place to stay, as well as the chance to help bring the two groups together. Following talks with his following and quiet prayer, Muhammad saw this request as a sign that it was time to leave. He has to keep going with his goal, but he has to do it somewhere safe where it can grow. Making the choice wasn't easy. This was his home country. Since he was a child, the streets of Mecca had taught him how to walk. He remembered every rock, every alley, and every smell of the market. I missed my old friends, but the task was more important, and it became a holy duty to protect those who believed in the word. When the leaders of Mecca found out about his plans, they were very angry. They told people to keep an eye on the roads, put men at the city's exits, stopped visitors, and set up ambushes. They wouldn't let him get away. Even worse, they couldn't let his word go anywhere else. What Muhammad did not do, though, was give in to his fear. He was smart to make sure that the Muslims left in small, quiet groups that left at night, like shadows moving across the sand. He was one of the very last people to leave. He was aware that if he left too soon, people would start to doubt him. And when the time came, he left with his best friend, Abu Bakr. Both of them kept quiet as they left Mecca, following the stars and little-known routes. They walked along paths in the desert for days, dodging guards and hiding among the rocks. At night, they walked quietly under the moon. There were times of stress, thirst, and not knowing what to do. But Muhammad stayed sure, as if they were being led by an unseen force. And they weren't just feeling safe. More than once, they came very close to being captured. Like the time they hid in a cave while Mecca's forces walked by a few feet away. A spider had set up its web at the hole, and a dove had built its nest close to it. When the people who were after them saw that it was still whole, they knew that no one could be hiding there. They went on their way. When they got to Medina, people were friendly and interested in them. People in the city were sick of fighting with each other and saw Muhammad as a chance to start over. The region's tribal conflicts meant that there had to be someone who could bring people together without ruling or forcing. And Muhammad quickly gained everyone's respect for his strong but kind stand. He didn't come to take over. He came as a guest. He didn't make laws, but he did give rules. There was order where there had been chaos before he came along. A lot of people gathered around to hear him. His words were wise, not meant to force someone to do something. He talked about fairness, unity, and taking care of each other. People were moved by those simple but strong ideas. It was in Medina that Muslims found peace. They could finally say their faith without fear for the first time. They could talk to their kids about the one God. They were free to pray outside. Freedom, which in Mecca seemed impossible, was now a fact. And because of that freedom, the neighborhood grew. But he didn't forget about Mecca. His heart still hurt for those who stayed behind, for those who were still in pain, and for those who were still being abused and worshipped false gods. He knew he would come back one day. But for now, it was his job to make the new community stronger and get the faithful ready for the difficulties that were still to come, since the job had just begun. Even though Muhammad missed Mecca, he saw Medina as more than just a safe place to stay. It was the start of a new cycle. With new people and different languages, he saw a chance to do something that had seemed impossible before. Build a community based on faith, justice, and getting along with others. Even though it was very hard, Muhammad saw this broken world as a chance to bring people together around greater ideals. Not only could you teach about the one God, but you also had to live out your faith. So he started to wisely lead the community's life. Muslims and the groups in the area became closer because of him, and they made deals that went beyond words. He set up the Pact of Medina, which was a serious promise between the different groups. Each group promised to treat the others with care, look out for those who couldn't defend themselves, share duties, and live together peacefully. In a time of cycles of payback, old grudges, and unstable relationships, this had never happened before. Muhammad went out to the people, listened to the leaders of the area, handled the problems of each group, and came up with clear solutions. Force would not bring peace. Instead, everyone would have to be ready to see something bigger than their own needs. Medina started to do well when he was in charge. Cooperation put an end to old arguments. Friends from the past started to talk to each other in public. People who wanted peace and justice came to the city in droves. In addition to addressing political problems, Muhammad set important social standards. He pushed people to help each other, help the poor, treat women with respect, and be kind to outsiders. Orphans were taken care of, traders were told to be honest, and families started to live by ideals of kindness. Not only did he teach, but he also showed through his actions that real faith shows up in small, daily things. Mecca, on the other hand, was in chaos while Medina was getting ordered. There were worries among the leaders of the holy city every time there was news of Muslims getting along better. They were afraid of how this new group would move forward. People used to think of Muhammad as a local issue, but now he was becoming a sign of something much bigger. His message was no longer just spiritual talk. It was a real threat to the power that was already in place. Things were getting more tense, like dark clouds in the sky. People who liked the old system couldn't stand the thought that Mecca could lose its power, that its gods could be ignored, or that the Kaaba's spiritual monopoly could be questioned. It wasn't long before the anger turned into open hatred. There would have to be a confrontation. The first fight would decide everything. The spot is Badr. When the Meccans showed up in larger groups, they were armed and sure that they could destroy the new town. Muhammad only had a small group of followers, and many of them had never been in the service. But there was one thing that numbers couldn't show: commitment. It wasn't desire that drove those men and women to fight. It was faith. You could tell they were fighting for more than just their lives. They were fighting for the right to live according to the truth they had accepted. There was a lot of stress when the forces met. At one point, it looked like the Meccans would win, but even the most experienced fighters were shocked when the Muslims won. The win at Badr was more than just a tactical achievement. It meant a lot of people that Allah was with them. It was like someone from heaven had replied. Medina was filled with the mood. Hearts got stronger, but this win also made their enemies even more angry. It wasn't long before there was another fight. The Muslims lost a lot of people at Uhud. The Meccans were motivated to get back their reputation this time. Even though they were very brave, Muhammad's followers had to run away because the fighting was so bad. Lots of people died on the battlefield. Muhammad was hurt himself. The city was filled with sadness. But even though he was sad, he didn't let hopelessness spread. He taught that hard times are part of the process. Faith is not only glory, but also strength. He went to see the hurt, soothed the families of the dead, and spoke words of hope to his people to bring them together. He learned something from every fall. Every fight is a chance to think. The neighborhood got stronger over time. People who were loyal didn't give up when they lost. In fact, it made them stronger. The Makkawan knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. He knew that time was on his side, though. People used to talk about their faith in the streets of Mecca, but now it was shouted from the parks of Medina. At the same time, attacks on Mecca kept happening, sometimes with weapons and sometimes with plots. They tried to break deals, spread lies, and get spies to work for them. But the people in the town never lost faith in their boss. Muhammad stayed strong, alert, and modest. It was during these times of fighting and rebuilding that a new feeling began to grow in the minds of many Muslims. The hope of going back to Mecca, not as rebels or as people on the run, but as peace messengers. The city that had turned them down might one day let the truth in. Not just a vague hope, that hope was becoming a strong belief. Even though Muhammad was always careful, he knew that the time for peace was coming. It wasn't even close to being over. But after so many deaths, there was finally some light on the horizon. Even though there was fear, faith, blood, and tears, history was still being made. But now there was also the certainty that Allah was watching over every move. In silence, the desert watched as Muhammad led tens of thousands of people toward the city where it all began. Mecca, which used to be very aggressive, was now waiting, with sounds of fear and excitement all around it. The person who had been kicked out came back, but this time not as a runaway, but as a respected leader. The people who were with him did not look angry. Instead, they saw respect and peace. It wasn't easy to get there. Years of being sent away, being persecuted, and fighting had passed. But now the time had finally come. The previous leaders of Mecca watched from inside the walls, but they couldn't stop what was going to happen. They had planned to harm Muhammad, but now they saw him coming at them with faith and conviction, which was stronger than any sword. A lot of people were afraid he would want to get payback, but he didn't. Muhammad didn't hold a grudge. He helped people forget. There were no war cries or threats as they crossed the city walls. All that was heard was a heavy silence. The men who were with the preacher knew they weren't there to kill, but to change things. Muhammad stopped when he got to the Kaaba, the old temple that was full of pagan symbols and pictures. He looked around and told them in a strong voice to take down all the idols. The signs of worship were taken away one stone at a time and sculpture by sculpture. The spot that had been the site of religious fights and tricks for hundreds of years would now be dedicated to Allah, the one God. Not as something that belongs to a group, but as a sign of togetherness for everyone. People who had hurt him before stood around and watched without saying a word. They were ready to be punished. But Muhammad surprised them by telling them he was sorry. He told them they were all free and could start over if they decided to live peacefully. Many people were touched by this sudden kindness and bowed their heads. Others quit their quiet protest because they felt bad about it. It looked like a new light was washing over the city. For Muslims, the calm entry into Mecca was more than just a win. It was the completion of a promise and the proof of their faith. There will be no death or destruction, only change. Muhammad did not demand that people be obedient by force. He offered to make things right. So, from that point on, Mecca started to beat again, but with a new name. Still, the work wasn't done. Even though there was peace in Mecca, the Prophet knew that there were still many people and hearts that needed to hear Allah's word. So, he set up the sending of agents all over the Arabian Peninsula. Each letter was a call to stop fighting over things that don't matter and start living a new life based on justice, community, and worshipping one God. Some tribe leaders replied positively, while others didn't care either way. Some people even made fun of the message or were angry about it. That didn't stop Muhammad, though. He kept leading his people and teaching them to be strong and not to react with anger, but with patience and good behavior. The neighborhood grew. The Muslims left their mark everywhere they went. It wasn't one of conquering by sword, but of change by example. There was peace between tribes that used to be at war with each other. People who didn't trust each other opened up to talking. That's all because Muhammad taught by his own life. Neither did he sit on thrones nor get rich. People who were poor could walk with him, share his food, and be heard. He always reached out to those who had been forgotten. The new people who were coming together were shaped by what he did. A group of people who didn't count on family trees but on their faith. A group of people who are united not by custom but by belief. And they had a strong sense of purpose that could not be broken by a sword. The word of Allah made its way through deserts, rivers, and faraway towns over the years. People came because they were interested and because they wanted to live a better, more fair, and more worthwhile life. Muhammad's presence among them led the way. The people were changed by his calm look, straight words, and strong but caring stance. But as the project grew, signs of its end also showed up. Muhammad was still busy, but he could feel his body getting weaker. He moved more slowly and spoke less loudly. His friends and family knew that his time as a guide was almost up, but no one dared to say it out loud. It looked like the Prophet knew it himself. During his last years, he taught more deeply. He got together with his friends more often. He talked about how important it was to keep the peace, do what's right, and help those who are weak. He said over and over that the word did not belong to him but to Allah, and that it would live on after he was gone. He spoke with a sense of quiet urgency. His words didn't sound scared. They had the calm of someone who has finished their job. Every action he took and every word he spoke became a memory and a heritage. Even though Muhammad knew he wouldn't live forever, he wanted his community to stay strong, based on deep faith and real deeds rather than empty traditions. After that, it was time for his last trip to Mecca. Thousands of people followed him. He gave a speech in front of the crowd that would be remembered for generations. He talked about equality and said that the only things that made one person better than another were faith and character. He said that going back to old ways was bad. He said again that all Muslims were brothers and were part of the same group. It was his goodbye. He didn't say it out loud, but the look in his eyes told me that the end was close. His health started to get worse after he got back to Medina. Some of his best friends were with him, but he stayed alone. He smiled and kept giving tips. But now his quiet was more important than what he said. And when his time came, there was no loss of hope. Yes, there were tears. There was also thanks, though. That's because Mahoma, the orphan that Mecca had turned down, had completed a task that nothing could stop. He didn't just leave fans behind. He also left a live, active society with ideals that will never change. His impact was not just the story of his life. It included everything that people did to spread faith, justice, and kindness after him. Muhammad never stopped teaching, even though his body was weak. There was peace in his voice that was even clearer in the last few days of his life. Even though he knew time was running out, he knew there was still something important to say. It was time to shut up everything he had lived and everything that had led him. So he chose to get his people together one last time. A huge field near Mecca was full of thousands of people. It quickly got around that the Prophet was going to give a new speech. People from all over the peninsula, including many from faraway towns, came to hear the man who had changed their lives again. Some parents held the hands of their old parents while carrying their children on their shoulders. Everyone was there with open hearts and an open mind. The Mahoma stood in front of the people. His face was calm, but his eyes were very bright. After that, he started to talk. He told everyone in simple but strong language that no one was better because of their race, wealth, or tribe. Greatness in a person was measured by their character, including how kind they were, how honest they were, and how much they respected others. He talked about how important it is to take care of the weakest people, like children, widows, and strangers. He said that every person was valuable in Allah's eyes and that women's rights should be respected. He told them that unfairness and abuse that was dressed up as custom had no place in the world anymore. He planted the last seeds of his memory there in front of a sea of eager faces. Not only did he give advice, but he also lived by what he said, and many of them cried as they heard him, not because they're sad, but because they're thankful. They knew they were seeing something holy. Each line felt like a stone being poured into the ground to build something that would last forever. When he was done, there was a respectful silence. No one was brave enough to talk. They did nothing but look at him as if they wanted to remember that moment forever. Soon after, in the year 632 AD, Muhammad got sick. His health slowly got worse. He stayed calm when he was back in Medina and with the people who had been with him since his early days in Mecca. He didn't look scared. Instead, he looked very calm. He greeted people who came to see him and gave them advice with few words. Everyone paid close attention to every move he made. He knew that his time with the living was almost up. Even though he was weak, he kept his heart strong. He kept telling his friends how important it was to stick together. They were told to stay together and not let fights destroy what they had worked for. His last words told people to put their faith in Allah above all else and to keep being fair, humble, and kind. Then Muhammad left, like someone taking a break after a long walk, without making a fuss or making noise. He left the world with the same honor he had lived with, but his spirit was still very strong even after he died. He didn't just leave a story, he also left a way to go, a way to live, a way. The sad news of his death spread like a soft breeze. It made people cry everywhere it went. Strong men cried out loud, women prayed with their eyes closed. Kids, who didn't fully get it, asked why everyone was sad. Medina, a city that used to be very busy, went quiet. But soon there was movement instead of quiet, because the pain of losing someone gave way to a sense of duty. People in the area knew that Mahoma's job did not end when he left. It was now their turn to go on, to get the word out, to do with so much love and work what he had taught them. That's what they did. His closest friends were in charge of keeping his lessons alive, putting together the revealed lines and giving wise advice to the people. The faith that began in secret in the back streets of Mecca was now being preached with conviction all over the Arabian Peninsula. People who used to be punished now teach. People who used to be afraid to talk about their views now did so with courage. And the history of Muhammad grew, not as a force that made itself known, but as a light that shone. With honor, Islam spread, winning people's hearts not through force, but through the truth it taught. It was also the figure of Muhammad that stood for a unique kind of leadership, one that wasn't built on power, but on dedication. He never sought fame for himself. He didn't build mansions or take advantage of his power for his own gain. His food was easy. He didn't have many things. His power came from always doing the same thing. He shared what he had at home. He did some work for us. He paid close attention to everyone. He helped people in need first. He didn't do anything for himself. He did it to help others. Islam taught us that service is the most important part of being a leader. Being able to care is what makes that person truly strong. That the most powerful thing is not a sword, but a good example. Not only did this way of life change Muslims, it also changed the way many other people saw the world. He did not just start a school of thought. He started a way of seeing people, where everyone is the same in God's eyes. A true heart is worth more than any rank here. Here, fairness isn't just an idea. It's a job every day. His story would be told and told again over the years, in faraway places and different tongues, when there is war and when there is peace, both in small towns and big cities, because what he said was always true. A lot of people still think of him when they talk about kindness, bravery, faith, and honesty. Muhammad, the boy who lost both parents before he could even understand what was going on in the world. The young man who looked up at the stars to calm down. The person who turned down fame and money to stand up for something more important. The leader who decided to forget instead of getting even. Who taught strong people to look out for weak ones. Who brought people together when there was conflict. His story shows us that no pain is worth it. That even being turned down can be the start of a goal. If you really believe that, it can change everything. They believe that every person, no matter where they are from, has the power to change the world if they walk with respect and fairness. Many people are still looking for meaning, direction, and hope today, and Muhammad's life is still a star. People remember him not as something stuck in the past, but as a link between the present and the future. Because he taught by doing, not just talking. He lived for other people, not himself. He wasn't trying to take over, but to free. That's why his voice can still be heard after all these years. In the hearts of people who want peace. In the things that people do to help their friends. In the strength of those who don't give up when things go wrong. Muhammad taught us that anything is possible if you have a pure heart, a dedicated mind, and a strong desire to do good. This story touched my heart. Please leave an amen in the comments and share this video with someone who needs to remember that true faith can turn even the driest places into roads of light. Please like, join, and follow us to learn about the great things that people have left behind. Have peace. Thank you for following us to the end of this incredible story. See you in the next video. May God be with you always. Amen.